Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Today we're going to take a look at one micro city in Canada and look at the decision-making processes that we all need to be looking at in the future, because the situation is no longer what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. We see with climate change, we see with income inequality, and just a variety of other issues. Mr. Randy Patrick is a city manager with the city of North Battleford, Saskatchewan, Canada. Mr. Patrick has been the city manager in Battleford, Saskatchewan, but also he's been city manager in a city in Alberta and in Manitoba provinces. Randy Patrick, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Well, thank you very much, Bill.
I appreciate you being with me. Sounds like you like smaller communities like I do. You've been there.
I have a preference, yes.
All right. We call them micro cities, right? Tell me a little bit about North Battleford. How large is it? Where is it located? What are some of your major industries?
North Battleford is located in the northwest, central northwest, I guess you could call it. There's actually part of the province here that's got a lot of trees, and that's above us. But we're kind of the central northwest towards Alberta. I was guessing probably 6-7 hours north of the border, the U.S. border. So it might give an idea. If you know where Saskatoon is, we are 130 kilometers from that. That's the major city that's near us, and 400 kilometers from Edmonton. So I don't know how much that helps. A lot of people are going, I don't know where that is to begin with, but that's okay.
You're in a rural area, no doubt about it.
Yes, we are.
Very true. Yeah. I'm just curious. I've wanted to talk to a city manager from a small town for quite a while, just to get a feel for the issues you're dealing with. If you're talking to somebody from Toronto or Vancouver or Miami or New York or whatever, they're going to have a bit of a different perspective being from a large metropolitan area. But what are some of the major issues you're dealing with right now as city manager?
Well, I think part of it's always cost. The smaller cities have tended to grow at a slower rate than the bigger cities, or sometimes the rural areas have depopulated in Saskatchewan. The cities themselves have done okay, even the smaller ones, but the areas around us are smaller than they ever used to be. It used to be just farming at one point. Our industries here, it's a lot of it's service industries. We have a very large health component. They're probably the biggest part of our industry's health here, and but often mainly servicing the local economy, farm and ag, and retail. So not a huge amount of industrial.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, you were in Alberta and also in Manitoba in smaller communities. How have the issues and the decision-making processes changed from when you started out as a city manager as to where you are today?
Well, I think the interconnectivity of people has made a big change. Even when I first started into this business, there was internet, but it wasn't being used to the extent it is, and the speed of change just seems to be getting faster and faster and faster. And I think that's in part everyone thinks they are tied in. Facebook didn't exist when I started, and now you have a conversation. You're having a conversation potentially with 10,000 people instead of 5. Used to be someone had an issue, they talked in the coffee shop, that was the end of it. Now the issue is everywhere.
That's
so
right.
You're dealing with a lot of them at one time. You never used to have to. You'd have 1 or 2 or 3 or and now you can have 50 or 60 problems going on at the same time potentially. And you try and deal with all of those.
Now you're a futurist. You're involved in futuristic foresight thinking. You'll have to explain what that is, but how has that factored into how you make decisions and how you're dealing with the changes in a rural, smaller urban community?
Yeah, I wish I could say I was perfect at it. I'm not, because like everyone else, I get caught into the present. But I actually I have a doctorate in strategic foresight, leadership, and my concentration was strategic foresight. And I think the one thing it's taught me was how little I know. And I think once I got that figured out, then it kind of opens you up a bit to trying to learn more and trying to understand how things will change, because like my interest has not necessarily been cities to begin with. My interest was organizations, and I kept trying to find out what made organizations work. And in the end, I kind of came to the conclusion that, you need all those things. You need to have good accounting. You need to have, if you're in a business, you need to have good marketing, but you have to have leadership. But in the end, it kind of came down to the ones that succeeded in the long term also had this very much future orientation. They were trying to understand what was going to hit them and either react or change it or be ready for it. And I think that applies to cities and businesses.
Do you find that a lot of the people with whom you're dealing, say local leaders, people who have their own businesses, maybe a farmer or a rancher who has a mega ranch, a mega farm, or now you're in the fossil fuel area too. You're in oil country, I guess, are you not?
We're right at the edge of it here. Yeah.
At the edge.
We're not in the middle of it. You go towards Alberta, there's
That's
more and
Alberta,
more.
right?
Yeah.
And of course, do you find that these folks are thinking more strategically than what they did 10, 15 years ago? I guess what I'm saying is, did they look at how they did things 10 years ago, how they did things 20 years ago, and now they're looking at what they did 10 years ago and thinking, we can no longer run our businesses like this. The whole situation has changed quite dramatically.
I think there's always some that do that, and some that go along with the flow, and some that will never change. It sometimes change just stops you from being, if you know what I mean, as an organization. If you haven't been looking at those changes, but there's very few businesses that would run the same way they did 15 years ago. I can't think of any right off the top of my head. At one time I was many years ago, I was in retail, and computers were just really starting to get in there. Good luck running a retail these days without the computer systems for inventory, for calculating where your sales are, for getting in touch with your customers. You need all of that now, and that's just to be competitive. You could probably still run it the old-fashioned way if you didn't have competition, but that's the world changed somewhere in there, and you have to adjust to get ahead of it. And the people that are really successful adjust in advance. They saw something coming and got on that trend, and that's some of the real entrepreneurs in the world. Silicon Valley, there's a lot of that, and that's the kind of success that retail organization is no longer necessarily in a building.
It certainly isn't. No, in fact, you can be on your smartphone.
Yeah.
You can have it there if you wanted to.
We're a large part of the sales of it. Yeah.
That's right. You were talking about computers. Some days when I get 400 emails, I think of the day, 30 years ago wasn't so bad with no computers.
I tend to agree with you on those days.
We live in. That world is gone.
It's
completely gone. Well, you have written a chapter in a new book, a new transformational paradigm. Tell me about that. What is that new transformational paradigm, and what were the main points in your particular chapter of that book?
Well, I think that it's again that how do you look at the world a little bit differently? The economy of the world is changing. If you look at it for the past 100 years, Western European, North America have been at the edge, or the leading edge of commerce and business, and we aren't anymore. And so what kind of changes has that brought about? What's going to happen in the future? And I think people have to start looking at that. So that's that paradigm. But it's not only just a paradigm. If you look at this area here, and I don't know the numbers, but probably if you look back 100 years ago, 85% of those people we were talking about were in agriculture. Now it might be 2%. So things have changed. They will continue to change, and I think you're actually hitting a new economy that at one time you talked agricultural, and maybe you talked industrial, and then the next economy was knowledge based. This is more than knowledge based now. The economy is you have to have the knowledge, that's a given, but it's how you're transferring the communications. It's the change in when you can now build a house using 3D printing. What's that going to do? So I think that's really been kind of where I've come from, and that's how do you start thinking those problems through, And the other problem is for people, it's the interconnectedness of everything. At one time, it would be real easy. If I had a policing problem, I'd hire 2 more police, and the policing problem would be kind of finished. Now it's, you would have to take a look at social services to help bring it down. You would have to maybe mental health. Everything has become way more connected. And I think that's kind of what people have to be thinking about in both business and in municipal government.
I think you're absolutely right. It's certainly a different era, and things have changed quite dramatically. Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guests. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with a PBS or a community access television station, or perhaps you have a podcast, or perhaps your own little computer or whatever it might be, and you have an interest in our programs, please feel free to share them. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today, we're talking to a city manager from Canada, and who's talking about some of the challenges confronting micro cities. Mr. Randy Patrick is the city manager with the city of North Battleford in Saskatchewan, Canada. Randy, we're talking about the issues confronting micro cities. A lot of this, you're saying, you're quite right, I think, and I know you're right, that 50 years ago, 80 years ago, you had 80, 90% of the people were involved in agriculture. Today, it's probably 2 or 3%. What other trends do you see developing in a micro city? Do you see that there's been an out-migration of younger people, maybe people going to Vancouver or maybe to Toronto or someplace like that? Do you see income inequality accelerating in your community? Climate change, which is affecting everybody. There's no way in the world we're going to get away from that one. It's affecting large and small cities. But how do those issues impact what you're doing and interact, and also are issues that you have to make decisions about?
Yeah, I think you definitely have seen the challenges of people moving away. We don't have the universities here. We're too small to have a major university. Go to Saskatoon, major university, go to Edmonton, major university. So, people tend to go there. I think there's also one of the issues is if you get into certain businesses or certain fields, it's always nice to be around other people in those fields. You grow from that. You learn from that. So one of the things that a lot of smaller communities, at least in Canada, have is a problem with medical, having enough doctors, because they like to be somewhere where they can go and take a new course, or talk to their friends, and there's lots of them, learn a little bit more about their business. So we have that attraction issue. We also have attraction issue sometimes with bringing in technical skill sets. Same reasoning, I think, in a large part. You're losing that group that's easy to deal with. Now, I think that what's happened, though, is that there's now ways of dealing with that we didn't have 10 years ago. Right? You can actually get on, like you and I are doing, and have those conversations. You can actually create a group of people that's widely dispersed, and share the ability that a major center has. Major centers have always been places of diversity and learning, because they just bring in so many different people. But with technology now, it's capable of doing it. So you got to take a look at how do you bring that in. So one of the issues in a lot of communities, though, is actually having internet speeds that are fast enough to do this kind of technology and have 2 or 3 of these conversations going from one business at the same time. It takes a lot of bandwidth. And, so I think there's some issues, like you said, people pulling out potentially, businesses going to a bigger place. But if you don't need to have that bricks and mortar anymore, you can now do it where you want to. So I see there's some real possibilities here for smaller communities, to have people who like living in smaller communities and growing your economy that you've never been able to do before.
Right. And some of these small communities are like bedroom communities near a large urban area where you have a lot of cultural, sports,
Yeah.
occupational amenities and that type of thing. And people are within maybe 50 to 100 kilometers from that town. I live in one of
I
those.
appreciate you using kilometers, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know what we're doing. We're talking Canadian today.
I can do either, by the way, just for the record.
Miles or kilometers, either one, right? Right. Now, we were talking a few minutes ago about the transformational paradigm, that new transformational paradigm. And one of the terms that's been used is a master capacity builder. What does that term mean to the layperson out there?
To me, it's really someone who brings to a conversation a futures look. Like, I go out to the community and I ask what people want, and they'll come back and they'll tell me what they want. But often enough, it's what they want today. It's not how things will change in 15, 20 years, right? And which the master capacity building brings in those people, but adds in some skill sets that aren't generally available out there. Someone who's willing to look at, understand they don't know things, be willing to listen to others, and sometimes change their opinions because of it. Also looking at trends, where things are going, and trends even that you don't know exist yet. They're just starting to show that there's some possibilities. They're called weak signals, and you're looking for those things, and not all of them may go to anything, but you're looking for what might be happening. And I think those master capacity builders start to bring that type of skill set in. So it's something you want to get into a system to change and have some thought of change rather than just being dragged through the change. If you start to do it in advance, you're way better off.
Exactly right. Be ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve.
Oh yeah,
sure. So I guess what we're saying, or what you're saying, is there is quite a difference between a transactional leader and a transformational leader. That we need transformational leaders for the future to deal with the fast-breaking events that are taking place.
You can be a transformational leader without being a master capacity builder.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I think it helps you if you've got those other skill sets. So because now I believe that being a leader, when I come out of all the training and stuff I've taken, what I've come out with is that leadership is the domain of the future, period. Everything else is management to me. And a lot of people love management, and that's good. But if you really want to move things, it's that future orientation. So I think that transformational leader is one who wants to build people. Transactional leaders, every deal we make, you and I come up with, I'll pay you 50 cents, or I'll smile when you come in the morning, or and if you're trying to do that and you got 70 problems going with 70 different groups, it gets really hard. First of all, remember the transactions, and to carry through with the transactions. If you're looking more at a values-based system of how to do things, and you want to bring everyone up, and you're talking about vision, and you're talking about direction, it's much easier to move, especially other organizations. The one thing that I have no say is with a community organization, they don't need to listen to me or to a politician or anyone else. They can do what they want. And so you can do the transactional thing and say, okay, we'll give you this, you give us that. Or you could bring together people and say, here's a bigger value, here's a bigger system, here's where we think things are going. Are you with us? Can you help? And I think that gets you a better response. And I think to me, that is more the transformational leader's approach rather than an approach of transactions all the time.
Now, as you've talked about foresight, looking over the horizon, seeing what's coming, anticipating it, being prepared for it, mobilizing your resources, involving the community into it, all of the various interests in the community, the educational, business, agricultural, whatever. What as you look forward, having already served as city manager in 2 other Canadian provinces, what do you see as the top 3 issues you're going to be confronting as you go forward, say in the next 5-10 years?
I'm sorry, I missed that. The top 3
issues.
Issues.
Uh-huh.
On the smaller communities, I think it's it really is, and I know this, some people might disagree, but I really think it's the connectivity with other communities. It's a very major player, or a major concern. If you can't keep up with the technology, and how do you build those communities that of people, experts from outside, and skill sets, and even medical. I see right now we're starting to bring in a lot of medical that's going to be distance type medical. I can now go and take a master's degree and never see the school. So that's kind of critical for us. I think the other is it's bringing in some of that thinking of how do you get out of your box. Right? What made you successful in the past may not make you successful in the future. So how do you start to train people to start to think out of the box, bring in some that futures training? That's going to be critical for success in the future. And I think that the last one is that it's helping guide people through that. Because just because you got 2 or 3 people somewhere who have that way of thinking, unless you're able to bring the groups together, peoples together in your community, and sometimes outside your community, to make things work better, you're just going to be gobbled up by the really big communities. There's a slight disadvantage. There's some real advantages of being in a smaller community, but there's some disadvantages, and I think that it's getting all of those things working together. And by the way, the part of the skill set is that even from the agricultural days, the things that small cities have been able to do is they did work together. It's just that it's now a little bit harder because you've got to bring in different expertise that you may not have. It's kind of the difference between a small city and a mega city. I've watched those with some interest, and they have the expertise in just about everything. In Canada, the really big cities compete with the provinces for total expertise in, say, environment. They'll have a number of PhDs working for them in environmental studies. Obviously I wouldn't, but and so that the same thing I suspect in the States, where you have the very large cities that have as much expertise as the state does, because it's just that diversity and the bringing together of people. So you have to be able to create that to maintain or grow communities.
It is a challenge, but it's one that we have to confront. That's for sure.
Yeah, it is.
Well, Randy, in our last 30 seconds, do you have a comment or a parting suggestion that we all may want to think about as we move forward? And we're already lunging through 2021 and soon to hit 2022.
Yeah, I think it's just give some thought to take a look and give some thought to trying to understand foresight, really, and bring it into the conversations, but also bringing those groups together. With a few people understanding, like bringing in your expertise from all over, have a few of them understand, try to understand a little bit about foresight, and talk transformational rather than transactional, as you said. But I think if you can do that, you can actually create some really impressive changes that communities it'll help them for hundreds of years potentially. Communities are long life, and or typically they should be. And I think that it's those changes now that will make the place much better in the future, and create a place where people want to live. And I think that small communities have a real benefit that there's a lot of people want to be in there. They just haven't been able to figure out how to do the jobs or whatever, and they've had to go to the cities. And there is an opportunity now that hasn't existed before, at least not in the last 25 years that I've been at this kind of thing, where you can now do business, you can now do schooling, you can now do communications, and you can do it in a place you actually want to be. Right.
One that has pretty much clean air, few traffic jams.
Usually good schools for your kids.
Good schools.
Yeah, and us really good, really decent facilities for recreation. So you can do it in that smaller community and not get lost in that 2-hour traffic jam.
Right. 3-minute traffic jams are bearable.
Those are big ones.
They're big ones for you, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, Randy, Patrick, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Well, thank you, Bill. Appreciate the time.
Okay, thank you. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.